Today, I'm going to be sharing just a few of my thoughts on Story of the World and why it wasn't a good fit for our homeschool. Hi, guys. Welcome. Thanks for joining me today. So, if you're new here, I'm a young homeschooling mom of three kiddos. I will have a first grader, a kindergartner, and a toddler this year. I'm also a homeschool graduate, and this channel is just my outlet for all my research and all the stuff I like to talk about regarding homeschool. I'm sorry today if my voice is a little funny or if I cough or if there's like weird cuts in my video because it means I'm blowing my nose and I really didn't want to do that on camera. I've been sick this week and I decided to go ahead and record anyway today, but it may be a little rough. And if that's the case, I'm just apologizing in advance. Life is as it is. And with kids, you just get sick. So it's part of real life. So sorry about that. Also, if you see me glance down, I just have a couple of notes because I want to remember what I wanted to say. And with this cold, I have been so foggy brained. So I also apologize if there's a few things I say that don't make sense. Feel free to comment below asking any questions if you want clarifying on anything I say or anything I didn't cover. Any thoughts, I would love just comment below and I'll get back to you. And I'll try to be as coherent as possible. But today we're chatting Story of the World. So let me preface this with something. I just want to say in advance that I'm not against this curriculum. I know a lot of homeschool moms who love it. And if that's for you, awesome. Like, I'm not anti this curriculum. I'm not saying you shouldn't use it. I'm not trying to bash it in any way. What this is merely like, this is a curriculum that I see rave reviews and a ton of people love. Awesome. But I find it helpful when I'm looking for curriculum to know not only why people love it, but if somebody didn't like it, why they didn't like it and why they didn't choose it. So this is really just my opinion and why I decided not to go with it. And maybe that's helpful for you if you're looking at history and trying to choose something. But this is not me saying you shouldn't use it or you can't use it or I hate it or I think it's bad curriculum. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just going to share my thoughts and what turned me away from using it so that you can make a more informed decision. Um, Also, this is nothing against the Well-Trained Mind. They're the ones who publish this. I love a lot of their materials. And it's actually one of the reasons I was leaning towards this in the beginning is it's because of them. So I love the Well-Trained Mind. I use some of their materials. This is nothing against them. So I just want to put that out there, preface it. This is not anti anything. It's just me trying to inform you. Okay, so now that that's out there. So initially, I heard a ton of rave reviews on this. Some of my siblings use it and love it, and my friends use it, and I was planning to use it. I was like, great! I love the idea of story format, history. It's the four history year cycles. You know, the ancients, um, uh, Middle Ages, modern, early modern, modern cycles, which is what we're going to be using in our homeschool. It seemed to check the boxes for me, and so I went ahead and bought a used copy of the story as well as a used copy of their activity book because I thought, why not get them in advance? I even bought some of the encyclopedias that they reference using with this activity book. They were super cheap. I found them. I was like, great, we're set. And then I did a little bit more digging and I read it through myself and I just wasn't as thrilled with it as I was hoping I would be. There were just some things that I didn't like that really turned me away from wanting to use it. And that really bummed me because I had it and I felt like it fit so much in what I wanted. It was that early age history that worked with young children. It was that story style. It was those 4-year cycles. And I really, really wanted to be able to use it. And so not to be able to was kind of a bummer. Now, all is not lost. And never was, I guess. The history that I did settle on, I'm going to be sharing a little bit more into next week. And we will be using some of the activities from this book along with it. So I'm not ditching the book entirely. I'm just not going to be using the history story part of it. But I can still use some of the recommended resources and encyclopedias and readers and all the stuff that's in the activity book. And we will be using some of that. So if you're interested in knowing what we are going to use for history, stick around because I will be sharing a little bit more into that next week. I mean, I did a quick reveal last week in our family stuff, which I shared what we're using, but I'm going to go a little deeper into it. Okay, but that's not what we're talking about. Sorry, I'm sidetracking. Okay, so what didn't I love? Just down to it. Okay, one of the things is, so we're Christians, right? And as a result, I'm familiar with my Bible stories. And so when I was reading this, and it was talking about Abraham, we'll just pick one in particular, and I was talking about his story and stuff, there were some things in the way that she presented Abraham and his story that were not completely accurate to the Bible. I felt like she took some liberties that I didn't really agree with. And as a result, I was like, well, if there's some liberties in the way she's presenting stories that I know and am familiar with, what are some liberties that she might be taking regarding stories that I don't know and I'm not familiar with. And if you want an example, I didn't mark these, so give me just a second. I could find it. Um, sorry. So the way she has it written is she has like the main text right here, and then she has kind of like stories written throughout about different people, and often it's about their myths or their religions or something like that. And they're more stories. And so she wrote Abraham's story like that, but it talks about um Abraham lived with his father and they did all these things, right? And Terah should have been happy for this was a perfect place to live, but he lived in difficult times. Um, and if the city was attacked, he could lose all of his riches. I'm summarizing because this is longer than that. And he worried and he asked the ancient Mesopotamian gods what he should do. He made sacrifices and then he decided to take his family and leave Ur. Now, that is not really the biblical account. It says God called Abraham out, that Terah moved his family and then God called Abraham out. It doesn't talk about him being worshiping the Mesopotamian gods at all. Now, they could have before God spoke to them. It's possible, but we really don't have that information. And it wasn't, yeah. And so it just it just wasn't 100% accurate to me. I felt like the way they represented that was like, huh. And so as a result, when I knew one of those stories was kind of represented differently, then I'm going, well, what do I do with the other stories that I don't know anything about? And so I just kind of put a little bit of mistrust or like hesitancy and like I don't know. So that was number one. And then the number second thing that as I was reading through, I found just challenging for me is there's a ton of reference to the gods and the mythologies of these cultures. Now, to be fair, I understand why she's doing it. The gods and mythologies are part of the culture's history. So I get it. They are a big piece of their culture and understanding their culture. But I'm reading this with my first grader, not my middle schooler or my high schoolers. And when we get to middle school and high school, we will open those discussions and have the contrasting discussions of their gods and our God and how it shaped their culture and how it really influenced them. But for like a first grader, I don't feel like I need to be having that conversation all the time. And I'm not opposed to them mentioning it. The history that we're using will mention the gods of the society, but they mention it in opposition to God. Like they compare it. So it's always kind of the focus is on God still. And it's not the focus. Whereas I feel like with this, every society she brings in their gods and like it's just a lot for me. There's a lot of mythology and other religions. And it's the focus was too heavy on that. I felt like there was too much of that for me and I'd have to be editing out a lot, which I could do. And if that was the only issue, that maybe I would just edit those out. And that's what I had thought originally. I'm reading it, I'll just skip it. But along with the other issues that I ran into, then it just became not worth it for me. So, like I said, I'm not anti mentioning the gods. I'm not anti discussing how it affected, the Egyptians did do the pyramids and the mummies because of their belief of afterlife, right? Like those things can be mentioned, but I don't feel like I need to focus on each god and what they represented and the stories of the gods. And maybe that was it. It's not so much that she mentions the gods as that she goes into a little bit of their stories, which makes it engaging, right? It talks about their culture and how they understood, but I don't really need my kid knowing the stories of the Egyptian gods and the fables surrounding it at this point. Like I said, when they get older, we can go into that a little bit more. But right now, that's just not where I am. Again, this is partly because of our beliefs as Christians and just some of that. So your beliefs may be different than mine as far as what you're choosing. But for me, that was one of the just challenges. Okay, another one, along with kind of how, like, I felt like the biblical stories weren't perfectly accurate, so then I couldn't know 100% how well she represented the other stories according to their accuracy. Um, I felt like in some of the text, it wasn't clear what was fiction and what wasn't. So in those little excerpts where she talks, the fables and the fiction, I feel like I like that she does divide that out. Like she talked like the history part, and then we go into this little like story in these brackets. And so that was easy. But like the first chapter of this book, um, is talking about nomads. It's talking about the first nomads. And so it's, going into these things. And then it goes into the story of Tarak, this 7-year-old girl who lives with her family in the days of the nomads. And she does this and she does that. And her uncles do this and her brothers do that. And uh, it's just part of the history lesson. And I could be totally wrong, but I'm assuming that's a fictitious character because I don't think we really have names of the nomads. These are supposed to be the first civilizations before they created civilizations along the Fertile Crescent and in Mesopotamia and along the Nile River. Like that's what this is supposed to be. And so I'm guessing by reading it that she made a fictional name and a girl to show the life of the time, which is fine, but I would love it if she put in there somewhere that this is a fictitious person because this is being written as if it's history. And if Tarak is a fictitious character, I'd love to know because I think she is, but I'm actually not even sure as an adult. And so how can I expect my kids to differentiate between fiction and history? It's not clear. So that was challenging for me. because then I don't know, again, in the other civilizations, if she makes up a character, how am I to know that? And like I said, I don't think she does. She probably doesn't. Probably it's because we don't really have records of those earlier people. And this is, again, I'm not a history buff, so correct me if I'm wrong. She probably had to create somebody to go with her story, whereas in the later civilizations, we had actual people that we can do that with. So, again, that was just challenging for me. And then I feel like the last thing, and none of these maybe in and of themselves would have been enough to tip me away, because I do like a lot of things about it, but altogether just was like, yeah, no, it's not worth it for me to work with all these things. But the other thing was, as I was doing more diving, as I was finding things that I was like, maybe not, and I was doing a little more digging, listening to people, I found some people who were talking about errors that were found in the history book. And now, granted, most of these errors weren't huge or big or gonna change the course of history. Um, and so, like I said, that alone may not have steered me away from it, because I'm also sure that a lot of the other history books have small errors, and I'm just unaware of them at this point. Um, but for instance, I think the way she describes papyrus being made, was inaccurate. She described it as like pulp that you dried out, whereas papyrus is actually reeds woven together. And again, it's been a while since I've looked at these, so I could be wrong in how I'm describing that. Um, and a few other things like that. And there's a list if you want to do some searching online. There is a list you can find of where people have found small errors, and it's not huge. But one of the videos I actually watched, and I will link it below, is from K.S. Lewis Luring, and she was just talking about her son is gifted and really into history, and he will remember these details. And so she was having a challenge with some of the errors that she found, because she didn't want him to remember it incorrectly. Now, a lot of our kids aren't that talented that they'll remember all the details perfectly and get hung up on it. But if you're interested in seeing some of the things that she was talking about, I'll link that below, because why recreate what she's already done? She did a video talking about it. I don't want to go into that. But coming across just some of those errors, I felt like the combination of all those things was just enough for me to go, we're just not going to use it. I'll find something else. And it was sad to me to do that, but it just made sense for me. And so I feel like those things were just the things that were challenging for me and that steered me away from it. Now, none of those things may be big deals to you. None of them may be enough for you. And again, like I said in the beginning of this video, this is not me out to bash this curriculum or tell you that you shouldn't use it or trying to turn people away from it. But I feel like as you're hunting for curriculum, it's really good to have a rounded view and to know what people love about something, but also to know what people don't love about something. And so that's what this is. I just didn't love some things about it. And so I'm sharing this with you so that you can know those things, and then you can make the decision for yourself and for your own family if you're interested or not. And I hope that you guys do find exactly what you're looking for as far as history. I know as a homeschool mom, it's our job to find what we think is best. And it's a challenge sometimes to find those and to find exactly what works for you. And that's the reason there are so many curriculums out there, is because not everybody goes for the same thing. So that's my mini rant, if you could call it that. Like I said, I am going to be sharing in my next video is my plan to share the history curriculum that we're going with and a little bit more detail into what we're doing. I created actually my own little like teacher's activity guide-esque thing to go with our history next year. So I'm going to be showing inside of that. So if you're interested in that, stick around for the next video. If you want to like this video and subscribe, it really helps my channel. But I hope you guys are having a great week. And hopefully by the time I record my next video, we're done with this cold, and so I'm not like sniffling all the way through. But thanks for bearing with me, and I hope you guys are having a great day.